Where can we integrate our shadow? This is an important thing because you're like, yeah, Damon, yeah, I know. I got a shadow. It's big and scary. I don't want to deal with stuff. I'm projecting it onto different things. I'm having extreme emotions about things. I'm realizing my shadow, which as a business coach, if you coach with me, we've talked about this. I don't do shadow work because there are actual people, coaches, therapists that do quote unquote shadow work. And I don't mean quote unquote as in it's not real. I mean quote unquote as in that's actually what it's called. I don't do that. I'm not trained in that. That's not my thing. My thing though is to help you get to the next level as far as where you want to be, particularly in your idea, your entrepreneurship, your side hustle, your product or service. To do that, we got to open up the basement. We got to air out the closet. We got to go up in that. We have to. Otherwise, frankly, as a business coach, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. Often we end up feeling jammed up. All of us, including me, we often end up feeling jammed up because we're like, oh, I need to make more money, but I just can't. I don't know what the problem is. The community just doesn't get it. Why aren't they buying my stuff? Right? It's like, oh, well, I need to go ahead and just finish this book, finish this project. But I just keep procrastinating and I just need to sit down, get my butt in a seat, and just get it done. So I'm just going to push myself. I still haven't done anything. We often don't realize that it's the undeclared part of ourselves. You think about traveling, undeclared taxes, undeclared luggage. It's those things that we left behind. As I say in my books, we have to go into those darker places because that's often where the gems are. So we have to sort through it. It's like going through recycling and realizing you threw a diamond in there by mistake. Same energy. You're just going to throw out all the recycling? No, there's gems in there. And it's not only gems as far as just having the monetary and frankly superficial value. There's also tools that will help you get to the next level. So integrating it, I think, is key to my coaching practice and a lot of the business that I do with y'all as coaching. And, feel free to jump in if I've coached y'all or if I'm currently coaching y'all. I feel like a lot of the work that we do is actually find a way to discover the shadow, to at least love it, ideally make peace with it, but that doesn't always happen. In fact, it's kind of antithetical in some ways to make a peace with the shadow because it's kind of what it is. It's a shadow. But then lastly, finding a way to integrate it in some way into our lives. I found that there's a couple ways to integrate it. The first way is actually through relationships. So I've been married for several years now. I have really close relationships with my two boys. I have lots of friendships. I've had a lot of romantic partnerships in the past. All those, and as far as business partnerships as well, like not even just intimate as far as being in love or loving someone. It can just be partnerships. I've done 27 books. Half of those books are co-authorships. Those were types of relationships too. I can do all this stuff on my own. I love being by myself. Even though I'm talking a lot, I love being an introvert. I'm one of those desert island people where give me, Kind of Blue and, Dark Side of the Moon and a couple of my favorite albums and put me on an island somewhere and give me some seafood. And aside from missing my family, I'm good. I'm just one of those guys. Even though I'm super independent, have my publishing company, again, have this TV show, I still know that my biggest growth to this day, again, I'm middle-aged, to this day, has come from my relationships. Because the relationships allow me to understand when I'm projecting. It's another party that's more objective than I am. Not completely objective, but more objective than I am. And ideally with the best relationships, and I say this to the people I love all the time, the best relationships tell me the truth. Not what I want to hear, not what my ego or my sunny side wants to hear, but what my shadow needs to be acknowledged for. Damon, you're kind of acting like that. I'm like, I don't act like that. No, you kind of are. Well, crap. Okay. Well, I guess that's part of myself that I'm not acknowledging. And a couple loved ones have told me that. People that I trust. Let me sit down with that and see how I can integrate that. There's so many folks, and I have so much empathy and sympathy for folks who want to avoid their relationship. They want to avoid the entanglement. Not in the bad way that in recent years, but the entanglement, that's what it is. When we build a relationship, when we connect with other people, it gets messy. It's my stuff and your stuff and our stuff, and then we have new stuff that grows out of that, and sometimes literally with kids, but it's like it gets messy. The beauty in that, though, is that within that mess, we get a little bit closer to our truth. And if you're afraid of having that level of intimacy, afraid of being known, which a therapist recently talked to me about, not in regards to me, but just a concept in general. If you're afraid of being known, how are you going to get to the next level? How are you going to know your shadow? Because you're not allowing other people to know you. If you're afraid of being known, how can other people actually give you the insight for you to know yourself deeper? Because there's no one that's going to be objective about it. You're just going to be looking at yourself. And as someone said to me years ago, you can't read the label on the jar when you're inside of it. In other words, it's not possible to be objective 100% about yourself because you're living your life. You're in your body. So I would encourage you, if you're afraid of relationships, whether it's having a deeper level of intimacy or being vulnerable with other people, I would encourage you, if you're feeling stuck, that might be part of the reason, because you can't do it on your own. So number one, as far as integrating that shadow part of yourself that you might feel guilt or shame about, or more importantly, you might not even recognize, you have to have a level of vulnerability and intimacy with other people. It could be one person. For me, I have that relationship with multiple people, and I feel blessed by it. Not even in a religious way, just literally, quite literally. I have multiple people where if I'm acting out, they will call me on my shit. Not everybody has that. If you're feeling stuck, think about if you have that honest relationship in your life or not. Because if you have a bunch of yes men, not to be sexist, that's an old school term of it. If you have a bunch of yes men around you and you're feeling stuck, somebody might not pull you by the coattails and tell you your shadow's at the wheel. You have to be aware of that part of it. So the number one part is relationships. The number two part about it is that understanding your level of acknowledgement once you see that shadow. And it's easy for those actions to come out, and then back to the projection, for you to say, oh, well, I'm not really an angry person. It's just that person act that particular way, and they made that part of me come out. Have you ever said that? I certainly have. I will own it. I've said it so many times in my life. And then have that realization where it's like, oh. Number one, that side came out again. It's like number two, it wouldn't have come out unless it was actually there. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like it reminds me a lot of in those times as far as when I've gone out drinking with a friend, or we've gone out for a drink or whatever. And then people will act a certain way and they'll say, oh, no, it's the drinking. And it's like, well, no, actually, that's your shadow. It came out to play. You gave it permission to hang out. You gave yourself permission to show that shadow side because you had this opportunity. Not judging other people, just those feelings, those big ideas, those shadows don't just come out of nowhere. It's the same reason why we don't all react the same to certain situations, because it's based on whatever our shadow's doing. So number one, I think it comes to having relationships. Could be a friendship, could be a romantic relationship, could be a family member, could be a kid, like, as far as your kid, not a random kid, but like your child or whatever, nephew or whatever, somebody to place that mirror up to you. It's required. It's required. The studies show, survey says, it's required. You can't do this alone. The second part of it is acknowledging when you do see it, whether it's you lashing out or it comes out suddenly in this extreme emotion, or someone reflects it back to you, to not immediately deny it. And to be like, yeah, that's part of who I am, Yeah. Thank you, Holy Chat. Thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah. And you're talking on Amazon. If you're on Amazon, you see the chat going on. But I think that's part of the dynamic is figuring out what relationships work for you, where you have the space to be vulnerable. Shout out to Brene Brown. You have the emotional safety and the space to be vulnerable. And you can show up as your full self. So if you can't do that, then, it just becomes more shadow play, and not, not in the kids program kind of way, not in a cute way, in a not good way as far as shadow play. If you want to understand your shadow a little bit more, I think a great place to start, which might be an odd choice, but it came to mind. I'm like, this kind of hits. It's Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Shout out to him. Fantastic. I hope you're doing wonderful. Bestseller. This is a brown copy. I think this might be my partner's copy. I can't remember. It's been around in the family for at least a decade, back when I had my first kid. Fantastic book. It talks about how you can strip things down to things that are the most important to you in your life. You think about my coaching, helping side hustlers, solopreneurs, other non-traditional entrepreneurs. Non-traditional to me dictates that there are certain barriers or certain resources, certain restrictions based on how we're building our startup, how we're building our product, how we're doing our side hustle, how we're showing up in the world. There's certain restrictions as far as how we can do that. It might be time, might be energy. A lot of folks that I coach, shout out to y'all, are dealing with like health ailments and things like that, chronic conditions that aren't going to go away anytime soon, if ever. How do you work within that space? This discusses that. This is important to the shadow conversation because that's essentially, no pun intended, but that's essentially what you're trying to do with your shadow, is to say, there's a certain defensiveness that I have towards this part of myself that feels unloved. That's why it's coming out in weird ways. It's coming out in me projecting things to other people. I want to be isolated. Don't want to talk to people, et cetera, et cetera. Like, forget this. I don't want to do this. Essentialism is basically saying, let's strip all that down and bring in those essential parts of your shadow, and maybe let go of some of those things that you have in your defenses. What's essential? If you think about being essential, you can also compare it to, again, you going through the compost heap, which I talked about in a newsletter a couple weeks ago. If you go to joindamon.me, get the newsletter for free. Subscribe, so you can see all the previous newsletters. I talked about going through your compost heap. Same idea, going through the rummage. Rummage? You know what I'm trying to say. The garbage. This is you sifting through it and saying, this is essential. This is not. I can let go of this belief. My belief that I cannot communicate well based on some of the trauma that happened when I was very early in my youth. I can let that go. It's not serving me. I can give love to that piece of my shadow. It might always be there, but I can give it love and be like, yeah, I don't feel that way anymore, but thank you. I give you love for that trauma. This other part, though, where me being afraid to communicate because I'll be misunderstood, let me try to integrate that part and become a better public speaker. Let me become a better author. Let me go and start this TV show. Let me coach people one-on-one where I'm talking to people every single day. Let me work on that so that part of the shadow, that insecurity, can be integrated into who I actually am. That 30 seconds, 1 minute, that's my whole journey. That's the integration. So that can only happen if you're willing to look at the shadow and figure out what parts you're going to keep, what parts you're going to give love to and let go of. Otherwise, what are we doing? A fantastic podcast that just came on. Shout out to Jonathan Fields. I actually have a couple interviews with him on the channel at bringyourworth.tv. Go ahead and go to bringyourworth.tv. You can go and just look up Jonathan Fields. You can go and find the interview that I had with him. He ended up talking to, I feel weird calling him Dan Pink. He's like older than me. We'll call him Daniel. Daniel Pink, the journalist / researcher. You see why I dig his work. Fantastic author and really good speaker. I love hearing him speak. And He talked about how to harness regrets, hidden power. This was so riveting and so good that I immediately shared it with family members. Like immediately, I was like, I was halfway through. I was like, I need to share this with everybody. It's so good as far as talking about some of our shadow, again, comes from guilt and comes from shame. Shout out to Brene Brown. With that in mind, a lot of that guilt and that shame comes from the past. And if it comes from the past, that means there's usually not anything we can do about it. So it becomes a regret. So this ties right into the conversation. It was a gift from the universe. I happened to stumble across this podcast that just went live. I don't know if it went live a few days ago, but I just discovered it like on Sunday. I was like, oh my God, it's perfect for the episode that I'm doing this Wednesday. So shout out to, I don't know you, Daniel, but I love your work. And shout out to Gather Fields. You know I love your work, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, but fantastic episode. It's all audio. Check it out. And they have a Q&A at the end too from some people. It was recorded live on LinkedIn. There's a Q&A at the end too that has some really good questions. Be sure and listen to the whole thing. And once you go through all that, you got to find a way to relax. Me talking about some of my shadow stuff today, I wouldn't have been able to do that 2 years ago, even though the show's been on for 3.5 years. I wouldn't be able to do that. Part of that is accepting and relaxing, being like, I'm human, I'm flawed. Excuse me, I'm human, I'm flawed. This is what it is. Like, and part of that comes from, and Pema Chodron talked about that in the excerpt I read. Again, I talked about it like 20 minutes ago when we were talking about recognizing and seeing your shadow. The softer you get into accepting who you are, the less you have to judge for being perfect. And I feel like a lot of the shadow discussion has to do with us, a part of us not fitting perfectly. I do mean that word perfectly into society. And so we don't know how to integrate that imperfect, quote unquote, part of ourselves into this perfect facade or social mask that we have outside. As Carl Jung talked about, and again, I can't recommend his book more. Again, all the links are below. Shout out to Joseph Campbell. That's where the shadow begins. And so the more we're able to relax into who we are, however we do that, whether we meditate, we rest, we spend time with loved ones, we build community or relationships, we give back. This part of me giving back is having the Bring Your Worth show. However we do that, if the more we're able to do it, the higher of a level we're able to do that, the more we begin to accept ourselves. And so this is a fun episode. Not this episode, but the episode link right here. This episode is not fun. But this episode, I think it's episode 333. Yes, this episode was last fall. Be sure and check it out. It's like 45 minutes. I give suggestions, books, tools, things that can help you get on your way as far as relaxing into yourself. So key as far as us integrating what our shadow is and who we are. This is the Bring Your Worth show. I come to you live Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. I'm an entrepreneurial coach, and I help side hustlers, solopreneurs, otherwise non-traditional entrepreneurs. If you want to work with me, you can come to damebrown.net. You can subscribe to this for free at bringyourworth.tv. Shout out to all y'all over on Amazon. I wish I could share the chat over here, but you guys got it popping. Thank you so much for coming through. J-Lo, as well as chat. Thank you. I appreciate y'all and the good feedback, and thank you for the follows and subscribes. For the rest of y'all, remember that your shadow is not your enemy. Your shadow is the basement. It's the attic. It's the cousin that you grew up with that, you might be a little bit ashamed of, but they're still your cousin. And if you're able to integrate that into your life, then you realize, number one, how much power that cousin, that poor proverbial cousin, how much power that cousin has, how much love, and how much they want to be loved, number one. But number two, all the gifts and the wholeness that you can have by integrating that into the family, into your greatest self. And if you can do that, the rest of it is golden. Listen, it feels like my camera's about to go out again. I think the ghost of Carl Jung is still coming after me. Much love to y'all. Hey, I'll see y'all next Wednesday, 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Let's end with my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes of all time. That which you do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. So if things just seem to be happening,